Welcome to the Venue Owner series of the Venue Success Podcast. This season is all about connecting you with venue professionals from across the country so you could hear firsthand the lessons they've learned, the highs, the lows, and everything in between, and what's actually working and what's not. And today I am joined by my friend, Brittany Schrader. Welcome to the show, Brittany.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so stoked to have you. Oh my gosh, we're going to have some fun today. A little bit about Brittany. She is an entrepreneur with experience in events, venue ownership, operations, and business development. She entered the wedding industry in 2017. She's worked across planning, sales, rentals, and venue ownership, including founding Elle Gray Events and producing more than 200 events. Alongside her hospitality ventures, Brittany is also a licensed real estate agent and investor, bringing a strategic and creative perspective to every business she builds. She's married to her high school sweetheart and is a proud mama of 9-year-old twins. So oh my gosh, like you have a wealth of knowledge, I know, and you have such a beautiful venue. So I can't wait to
Yeah.
dig in today. But before we do, friends, it's time for Crazy Stories with Tirzah and Brittany because people have lost their minds. So, Brittany, take it away, girlfriend. Tell us your unhinged story.
For sure. When I was thinking about what I was going to say, so many stories were popping into my mind that I'm like, I don't even know where to go with this. But one that just kind of popped in my head was we are a privately owned venue. So we're not in a city. We don't require currently security or anything like that. But I was working a wedding, super high end. We had amazing vendors on board, and there was a altercation in the men's bathroom. And so I was cleaning up for a cocktail hour. We're in the middle of the reception at this point, and there's a full on brawl between two family members in our men's restroom. And so they kind of spew out of the restroom, and now they're in this altercation. And it was in that moment, how do I react? Well, the photographer who charges a decent amount of money, like 10 grand. He's a very high end photographer. He happened to be family somewhere along the line of some guests. And so he tells his second photographer who was working with him, who happened to be his wife, he's like, she's pregnant. Get into that room, go lock yourself in there. Don't come out. And I'm like, do I go with her? Where am I supposed to go? Because apparently someone in their family before had killed another family member and had been serving time. And so I was like, he's like, this has happened in our family before, not at a wedding. And he's like, but go. So immediately, you're on the on the call with the cops and trying to get cops there and breaking things up. And that was just absolutely insane.
Oh my gosh. So was this during the reception or was in
During the
between?
reception. During the
Oh
reception.
my goodness. So
Yes.
the cops came. Did they take anyone away or did they just calm them down and leave? What happened?
So let me tell you what a godsend that at this particular wedding, there was a person who handled de-escalations for all the nightclubs in, I think it was Dallas or Grapevine, and he
Fantastic.
from Texas. And he happened to be a guest at the wedding that literally ran bar programs teaching other staff people how to de-escalate fights. So thank goodness he was there and jumped in. And then they separated the groups. They got in vehicles and they left even by the time the cops got there. So honestly, best case scenario for me. But for those first few 5 minutes, that was extremely terrifying.
Oh my goodness. Were they intoxicated at all? Did you ever figure that out? Yeah.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
took one comment once
Yeah.
someone had
Yeah.
been, intoxicated, and that was all it took.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's so funny. It literally happened to me yesterday. So I was having dinner with a new friend and I was telling her a little bit about what I do. And she said the thing that everyone says, and I'm sure you know what I'm going to say. Your job must be so fun. It's the happiest day of people's lives. Oh my gosh. And I'm
Mhm.
like, if you only knew the things that we have to deal with, yes, it is a great job. Sure, but there's so much like this that I wish I could say that your story is uncommon, but it's just not. Like, people truly are so unhinged on wedding day. They're so stressed out. I feel like a lot of people nowadays don't have the ability to manage their emotions well. And, like, yeah, I mean, it's so common, unfortunately. And I
It
feel
really
like a
is.
lot of us aren't truly prepared for what to do in a contingency. Like what is our plan in a situation like that? Like in our staff
Mhm.
training, obviously, you didn't even know what to do. I wouldn't have probably known what to do
Mhm.
if someone sneaks a gun on the property or something
Mhm.
like that. Like, it's making me think, like, oh my gosh, I should have probably had some contingency plans like that for my part-time 16-year-old staff. Like, what happens
Mhm.
if you feel like you're in danger?
Mhm.
I can't say that we ever had those types of conversations with my team, but we probably should have.
Mhm.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, you think you're getting into weddings and events and it is going to be fun and beautiful and all these things, but you don't you don't necessarily know the couple and their immediate family, let alone plus ones and just drama along the way with other the guests that are coming. So yeah,
Oh my gosh. It's so
and there's
true.
so many stories like that that I could just keep going off of a riff
I know.
because these things really do happen so often. So yeah, that's why
Yeah.
your contracts are important and definitely staff training.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, thanks for your fun story. Here's a little fun fact about Brittany. So she was sharing that she grew up in Florida and she loves the water and the beach, but the mountains, she said, feel like home to her. So every summer, she and her husband drive across the country with their kids to Colorado. And she says it's the best 2 weeks of the year for them. And they have no schedules and they take bike rides and they hike and randomly find a creek to play in and love getting to explore. So that is such a really fun fact about you. And when I was reading that, I was like, of course, this is like the thing that she says, because when you're in the event industry, like all of us just want to escape where there's no other people.
Yeah. 100%. Exactly.
Oh my
Exactly.
gosh. My family has typically loved to, especially when my kids were little, to go on like a Disney cruise or something like that. And I just bite my tongue, but I'm like, this is truly the last thing. I want to be in a cottage in the middle of the mountains,
Yeah,
with me and the
secluded.
bears. I'm fine. I don't need the
100%.
people or the
Yes,
entertainment.
absolutely, for
All right.
sure.
Well, let's jump into some fun stuff today, and we're gonna just talk a little bit about your story, of course. So I would love for you to share kind of the origin story as we get started, about Colonial. Oh, it's called the Colonial. I
Yes.
know your venue is, outside of Tampa in San Antonio, Florida. That was a fun, interesting fact that I learned today, that there was a San Antonio, Florida. I lived in Florida and
Yes.
I didn't even know that.
It's always been like a super small one stoplight town, and I've gotta say the growth is just coming to our area like crazy, so hopefully we'll be on that before too long.
That's awesome. So tell us and listeners a little bit about how the Colonial got started, and then we'll jump into some educational content for our listeners.
Definitely. So I always tell people that when I was 18 and trying to decide what I was going to go to school for, I didn't really know. From the time I was little, was always coming up with like inventions because I thought at the time that that's what an entrepreneur was. I always grew up kind of watching my mom, who had worked at home and she had her own business, but she could still work from home and be a boss in her home office, but never missed like a cheerleading practice for me growing up and was always able to kind of balance both worlds. So when I always thought about what I wanted to do, I wanted it to be able to have a little bit of that in it. So growing up, I created all these inventions of things because I thought I was just gonna, that was what entrepreneurship looked like. Then once I turned 18 and kind of had to make the decision of what am I going to go to school for, I was really active in sports. My boyfriend at the time, who I've now married, he was on a track to play professional baseball. So it was kind of just what our world revolved around. So I actually went to school for sports management originally, and ended up getting my master's degree. And when I was pursuing my master's in park and rec administration, which is just so bizarre to me that I do what I do now, I had to write a project about a small business that would like impact the economic impact in a small town. So I wrote that project for school, and being the overachiever that I am, I actually ended up writing a whole second project, and it was about opening a wedding venue because I just had the calling on my heart. We were dating at the time, we weren't engaged, but I could kind of picture what that would look like. And so I wrote the business plan, and on Christmas break, I went straight to my father-in-law's office, and I was like, I wrote this business plan. I think you guys should put a wedding venue on the property. And I'm sure at the time he was like, whoa, girl, like you need to slow your roll. But he always had kind of kept that idea in the back of his mind. And so fast forward, I graduate from school. I start working in operations, but it was for in sports. But I was always planning events. So Wellness Wednesdays and Fitness Fridays and concerts that we would host different concerts. And so it was event flow and parking and signage and all the things that I think about now, just in a different aspect. And I realized that my calling was definitely more in the events. That's the part that lit me up. I was signing up for anything volunteer in order to plan those events. And so once I had my kids, that's when I truly learned, like, I felt like I was doing myself a disservice by not going after my own dreams and like knowing one day I would tell them they could be anything that they want to be. And if I wasn't living up to that expectation, I knew that I had to kind of start that.
I love that. Okay, so the Colonial is
Mhm.
on your in-laws' land, is that
It
correct?
is. That is correct.
Okay, so did
Yes.
you build it from scratch? I know there's like a house that is I've seen photos on your website and then a
Mhm.
beautiful reception space. So how did
Mhm.
that all come to be?
Yeah. So in 2020, my husband's grandmother had unfortunately passed. And so the house was left to the siblings. And so some of them weren't interested. They don't live in Florida anymore. And then my father in law then came to me and he said, do you remember that business plan that you wrote a few years ago? Like, do you think that you still could do that? And so I said, yeah, I think we can give this a go. And after I had left my career in sports, I actually had started the Elle Gray Events planning company. So
Mhm.
I was traveling all around Central Florida. I had done some out of state weddings. So I had a pretty good grip on what that would look like. And so that's really when we kind of put the business plan into effect and started renovations of the project. So the home was always there, raised all six of my father-in-law's siblings. They built the house in the 60s, so we're talking 6 decades worth of memories and parties and all that they had had in the home. There was a pool house next to a large pool. We turned that into a smaller event space so we can seat about 50 people or less in there. And for what is a really small town, there's not a lot of places to have showers and birthday parties and more of those intimate events. So that has been a great calendar filler for us personally.
Awesome. Yeah.
And then because if we don't book within 90 to 120 days, then we open the calendar to host those smaller events. So that's been a fantastic just extra addition and revenue builder there. And then we do have our large event space, and that was a full construction from the ground up.
What an adventure. So you
Yeah.
started building that in 2020 or 2021?
2021 is when we started the build, and then we had our first wedding in April of 2022.
Oh. In all honesty, you're still fairly new to the industry, and I'm sure
Mhm.
still learning a lot every single
Mhm.
season and growing. So I mean, it's incredible the learning curve. If even building, I'm sure that we could have a whole podcast about the
Yeah.
whole building
The
experience
process.
too.
Oh yeah.
It's
Mhm.
wild. Okay, so the transition from planner to venue ownership, what was that like for you? Because I know obviously there are some cohesive parts of that. But what did that feel like for you transitioning? And does Ella Gray still exist? What was that
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, so originally, the plan was to have the El Grey at the venue, and be the in-house planning team. I realized though, with having the planning company was super successful and going out everywhere, but trying to retain staff for the planning company and send them out all throughout Central Florida and be training them to lead weddings to the standard that I had built and put in place was hard for me to keep an eye on
Yeah.
while doing construction and while trying to fill a calendar and also staff the venue side of things. So we made it work. But this past January, we did decide to interview and bring in different planners onto the scene. That was really hard for me as far as being able to let that go because that was like my first business baby that I kind of had built
Mhm.
up and kind of deciding, do I let that go or not? But I did realize how important it is to put all the SOPs in place, make sure that the contract is just on the up and up and it's very rock solid. And there were so many strategic business decisions I feel like I had to make for the venue that the planning just wasn't, I couldn't give 100% to both. So I'd say maybe in the future I'll bring it back and redo training and stuff for that. But right now we are not.
Interesting, very interesting. So, what would you say the biggest advantage that you felt like? Obviously, as a wedding planner, you've gone to venues all over Central Florida. What do you feel like you brought to the table in terms of your experience as a wedding planner, then becoming a venue owner? Because it is, I see that as a really common transition. I think there's two top vendors that become venue owners that I have
Mhm,
seen.
mhm,
It's photographers and wedding planners. I see
mhm,
that all of the time.
mhm.
So, what do you think that, or what do you know that you brought to the table as a planner coming into venue ownership?
I think it was the absolute best thing that by being the planner first, because there were so many little things that when we were in construction that it really helped me. So I had been at venues where the bathroom doors faced the inside of the reception space. So you're in the middle of speeches and a door opens and the toilet flushes. And it's like, that was a huge no-no for me. So our bathrooms are still undercover, but they're outside and there's double insulation in between those walls. So like little things like that. I had been to a venue where we had buffet with heat lamps at carving stations and a sparkler and all the other things were going. And it was now time to have her moment after a dress change and the cold sparks didn't fire and we flipped a breaker. And it was like now in our venue, we're on 6 different circuits and every 3 outlets, we have a new circuit. So that does not happen. So little things like that, just from a construction perspective. I think where it really helped me the most was that I had been a part of so many conversations with families and with couples about
Mm.
budget. What's the most important to them? Where were they disappointed in other vendors along the way with communication or not knowing what to do next? And so, as we moved and are still moving into this new generation of buyers and clients, I feel like I had years worth of experience having those conversations. And so our packages now are truly tailored towards being a guide for couples to make it as stress free as we can from a venue perspective, where we don't just book them and tell them we'll see them on the wedding day, that we're truly there to be a resource for them. And so putting that into our marketing and into our sales pitch, I think has been the biggest blessing.
No, that's very, very well said. Do you feel like there are any gaps that you were able to solve that venues could possibly miss? I'm sure there's 100, but what are some of those gaps that you kind of filled?
Gaps that I filled is just, um, honestly having also vendor connections, knowing the right professional vendors to bring in and having those resources. And then I feel like with the planner aspect, we have to pivot so much. You do have to know about everything, load in instructions, parking instructions. So from the beginning, I kind of had those in place of like being able to have vendors on board or being able to pivot when something's not working. I didn't sit and dwell in that long. It's like, okay,
Mm.
that's not working. We're going to switch to this. And so those are some of the gaps that I think sometimes people could get stuck in that for a little while. And I just didn't sit there long where I'm like, we're going to readjust and switch.
So it's interesting because I feel like it might be good for listeners to hear kind of your business model with your venue because there's so many
Hmm.
different ways that people handle that where it's a venue only, they open it and leave and they're on their own to do it all. There's all inclusive obviously, I'm passionate about what is your business model in terms of what couples get when they book the Colonial.
Mhm. I have both. So I have both packages. I have a venue rental only. It includes, and when I say that, it does include a venue coordinator on site for them. And then it also includes tables, chairs, and linens. We do require them to work off of our preferred vendor list. It's not 100% required. It is heavily recommended. And should they decide to bring somebody in off of the list, we have a agreement that they signed that they're taking responsibility for hiring the said vendor. So that's what our venue rental only looks like. I would say that probably 8 times out of 10, our all inclusive is our bread and butter package. So we
Mhm.
have the venue rental only because I don't want to totally shy away from that. There are people that do a
Yeah.
fantastic job and just want to be
Mhm.
more hands on. Our all inclusive definitely is the bread and butter, though. And that includes everything with the exception of, and we're working on things, but it does not include the actual, it doesn't include catering and it does not include the alcohol and mixers. So it does include the service portion of a bar, includes the bartenders and cup straws, bar napkins,
Mhm.
all of that.
Mhm.
But we purposely, and maybe it's because I'm a foodie, I just didn't want somebody necessarily telling me what I could serve. So we have absolutely a required list of caterers to work with. And as long as they're working within those five, they're allowed to come on site and complement our all inclusive package.
And just a nosy question for you. Do you get
Mhm.
any commission from them, or do you have any financial relationship with those caterers, or they're just part of your trusted team?
So originally we did not, and that was only to try to figure out who it was that we were going to bring in, and who we could establish the best relationship that would not only communicate with us, communicate with the clients, that they weren't service feeing them and going against what they promised us. There's so many things that happen,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then who shows up on that day? Are they hiring their team in house? Are they contracting that out with somebody who's never worked with them before? We kind of learned through a lot, honestly, at first. And now those required ones know our systems. And moving forward, yes, they will be a bit of a kickback that comes back to us.
Awesome, awesome.
Hmm.
People hate that kickback word, and I honestly, I don't at all because it's like it's not really a kickback, it's a profit share. That's the way
Hmm.
I like to think of it,
Hmm.
because you are referring so much business to them, and I feel like the best partnerships come when there's a win-win on both sides of things,
Hmm.
and one person's not taking it all, so I think that's a
Hmm.
wonderful thing. But as we talk about vendors, how do you think that vendor relationships either strengthen or damage a business? I'm sure that you've got some crazy stories about that, as I do. And kind of share about how you chose those preferred vendors. And as a way, I know that we have these preferred vendor lists because it helps protect our brand. So we know that to be true for sure. But what are your thoughts about vendor partnerships?
Absolutely. So I think that this goes and can go in so many directions. But as far as being able, they have to be able to, there's got to be a give and take between the venue and the vendor, or actually all of the relationships. So um, it's volunteering to do a styled shoot that we can host at the venue that I can then use in our marketing for the next season. So it is volunteering your time. It may be labor, flowers, whatever that is, but by you doing that, I'm able to produce the next set or the next season's worth of marketing material. And if I book, then you book. And so knowing that there's like a give and take there is one thing. I do think that at the end of the day, if something does go wrong, the venue is who they're going to blame. A lot of times it is venue
Yes.
and planner. And so my job is to try to make sure that everybody who I'm bringing on board has those same beliefs that I have, as far as putting the client first and being a guide or being a resource, or they're not going to be ghosted. Or I'm sure that you've seen tons of Facebook groups and you hear these horror stories. And that's just not something that I'm willing to put, something that I put all my time, effort, energy into growing and let it fall because of somebody else's, mistake.
Oh my goodness, so true. Have you had to remove anyone off of your preferred vendor list yet?
I have. I
Yeah,
have. Yeah.
it's a
And it's,
touchy thing.
oh, it hurts. It hurts so bad because you do establish these relationships and honestly friendships. I consider anybody on our preferred list, especially our all inclusive. I would go to dinner with every single one of them. They
Mhm.
become almost friends because you spend so much time with them. Um, so yeah, I have had to do that. And it's a really hard conversation. And at the end of the day, the quality of product might be great, but if you're not communicating, or if I'm having to filter conversation or make excuses for you, I don't have time to make excuses why you're not answering somebody back. Your job is to answer them back. So,
Yes. Oh my goodness, that would drive me so crazy. I'm like, I'm literally putting money in your lap. And to answer an email or a phone call to me is the easiest thing that anyone could do in their
yeah.
business. And to me,
Mhm,
I always felt like, they got too comfortable with this partnership.
mhm,
And so if
mhm,
you're going to be lazy with my clients, I can't support that at all because
mhm.
customer service was always our number one. We also, something that just popped into my mind that maybe listeners would benefit from with our all inclusive, I sat down with all of them once a year. Obviously, if something came up during the year, we would get together and chat about it. But once a year, I kind of sat with them and it kind of gave them a review too,
Yeah.
because I wanted them to know that like this partnership is something that I took seriously. Not that they were on like my payroll in that way, like an employee, but I treated it almost just like an employee review.
Uh-huh.
And I talked to them about what I saw that went well, what didn't, areas of improvement, ways that we could grow together as a partner. And that was always a time that was really beneficial for us to I have always this mindset of continuous improvement and I never want people to get lazy. It's like, hey, well, what's a new menu item that we could add? Or when we talk to the DJ, you know, um, sometimes we had to have some hard conversations with them and um it was mostly well received, but sometimes
Yeah.
those were hard conversations
Mhm.
and very important ones, though, for sure. So, as we talk about the fact that you built on your in-laws' land, I'm sure
Mhm.
that working with family has its own dynamics and will protect any scary, terrible stories that may have occurred in the past. We don't have to talk about that. But what does that look like as a family? Like, what are the roles, responsibilities? How do you work as a family in the business?
Such a good question. There's been moments where it's wonderful and amazing, and then there has been times in full transparency where it's been very, very touch and go. I think in certain aspects there are things that I didn't think that they would care about that they did. So there's certain renovations or things that I wanted to paint or redo, and because my father-in-law had lived there his whole life and it was special to him, or he poured that concrete pad and him and his siblings had their handprint in it when they were younger. And I was like, let's knock this down. And he's like, absolutely not. And, it was kind of some of those things where I'm like, maybe we can paint this part of the brick white. And he's like, I hand picked every one of those bricks with my siblings. Like, no way. So definitely little things like that along the way. And I think it was a really big learning experience for me to be like, I'm just a goer, I'm a doer, I move fast, and I didn't always think to bring them along with me, and so I had to really step back too sometimes and be like, "Maybe I have seemed disrespectful to you because I had made decisions because I was so used to operating as a solo entrepreneur for so long. I was kind of just in fight or flight and making decisions and moving on to get things done versus maybe I should have dwelled and sat with things longer, asked for permission." So it was really kind of learning what that looked like. But now it has really balanced out pretty well where they own the land and the real estate that it's on. And my husband and I really kind of operate and own the business portion of the Colonial at Sunset, which sits on their property. So I'm more so a tenant to them as landlords at this point, which
Yeah.
really kind of helps separate it a little bit.
Very, very good. I'm glad to hear that you did that. That's an important
Hmm.
step to take for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So, as we close out today, what would be some of your words of wisdom for owners? Like so you're in your first, what are we, 5, 6 years in?
Mhm.
What are some of the biggest lessons that you feel that you've learned up until this point?
I feel like I have so many. I will say, one thing is not getting just too comfortable. Always continuing to like grow and learn and attend the networking events and go to the conferences and expand your network because the more that you can be a forever learner, the better that you can bring that back into your business and implement the smallest steps. And then when you talk about small steps, sometimes it's just the consistency every single day of putting in that work one thing at a time. Because I used to get extremely overwhelmed with there always being something to do. Like
Oh
you're
my
never
goodness, yes.
quite done. You're never
Yeah.
done. And you check off this big project and then 15 little ones come up. And so I've just really learned to one thing at a time, like Rome wasn't built in a day, and to truly try to accept that. Like if I'm making forward progress, that's a win in itself. And then the second part is that when you do make mistakes along the way, the more that I could own those to my team or to whoever it was and be like, that is on me, and we're not going to do it this time. And also teaching my team that it's okay if you make a mistake. This is how we're going to rectify it. And now we're going to ask better questions and be better prepared next time. So letting them know that I had their back.
Mm.
Little things came up on wedding days or throughout the planning.
That is huge. Oh my goodness, that is so huge. I'm actually speaking at a conference this summer, and that's a big part of what I'm going to be talking about um, with team because I feel like it is an area that a lot of us as venue owners are unprepared for leading a team. You know, a lot of us don't have a background in this at all. Like we're coming at it
Mm-hmm.
from I'm working with a client right now and they sold their pest control company and shout out to Meriwether Manor.
Mhm,
Um, but they don't know anything about owning a venue. You know, there's just so much about it that it's such a very, very steep learning curve that a lot of us are just unprepared for. But
mhm,
when you're hungry to learn, it
mhm,
is totally possible when you have a passion for it, which obviously you do, Brittany, and you've done a really great job. I want to commend you for how far you've come in such a short amount of time. And I think there's a lot of people that sit back and they complain and they have a bad attitude. And, you know, the first 7 years, I believe, are the hardest. And, you have such a great positive attitude about it all. And I feel like that is such an important part of that early process and being humble to
for
know that you
sure.
have areas to grow, and so high five for
I
that.
thank you.
Good job.
Thank you. I do think that this is a really hard industry. And so I think that if people go into it thinking that it's just going to be a great money maker or they have this land and they're going to put a venue on it because it seems like it's fun or it's easy. It is fun. I don't think it's ever easy, but just continually to work on those things and to continue to train your mind on getting better. Like the sign behind me says, what's the best that could happen? And it's just not
Mhm.
sitting in a victim mentality or the inquiries aren't coming in or people aren't booking as fast. It's like you could sit there with all of those things and let those negatives win. Or you could say, it's not working for everybody else, but what is everybody else doing? And what can I do different? What are the couples actually asking for? And so it really, I guess that's my last piece of advice is just open up your ears, go to those training, read the Facebook group, things that's the easiest thing you could do. Go read and see what people are frustrated about and figure out how you can solve that in your business. And once you start putting that into your marketing or your sales pitch, you'll drastically see an increase in bookings
Yes.
just by that one simple step alone.
Yes, and when Brittany's saying Facebook groups, let me clarify. These are like bride to bride Facebook groups. Just
Mhm,
join them and be silent. Just listen, watch, and you need to know what the needs are in your area and
mhm,
stay in your little neck of the woods because
mhm,
the needs that I have in Charlotte may be different than the needs in one stoplight, San Antonio, Florida,
mhm.
right?
Absolutely.
And so have a pulse on your market. And yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, not to like open up a can of worms right now, but I think what goes along with knowing your market is being up to date with your market analysis and knowing who are my I say competitors, but whatever. Like who are other people seeing? What packages do they have with that knowledge of who's in your area that could help you figure out, okay, what can I create that nobody else has, you know? So it's really, really, really important to know your
Mhm.
market, to know your brides and grooms in your area. What are they looking for and solve needs? So thank you for saying that because I feel like that's really important. A lot of times people in these Facebook groups get advice maybe from someone that is in a totally different situation from them, and you gotta
Mhm.
be careful who you listen to
Mhm.
because, not all Not all advice should be taken, let me just say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. Sometimes I read that stuff or somebody goes on a rant and people want to fill in and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is so outlandish and you probably haven't worked many weddings or you're whatever, all the things." But yeah, it is good. It is good market research to hear what people are wanting or where their frustrations are and try to solve it in your own business, and we'll leave it at that.
Exactly. Yes, we will leave it at that. But today's been wonderful, Brittany. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom with us. It's really been lovely. So we will see you all next time on the Venue Success podcast.